from the outside, your life probably looks very similar to what you hoped it would look like at this point in your journey. You've built the business, you've earned the respect, you've achieved the goals that most people only dream about. So why do you still feel like you can't relax? Why do you still feel guilty when you're not working? Your mind constantly jumping to the next problem to solve. Why do you feel disconnected, unable to be fully present when you're with your spouse and your kids? And why does one piece of criticism stick with you so much longer than 10 compliments? And why, despite everything you've accomplished, do you still feel like you have something to prove? If you've ever caught yourself thinking, I know better, so why do I keep doing this? Let me remind you that you're not alone. And here's the question that I want you to chew on as you listen to the remainder of our conversation today. What if none of those patterns I just mentioned started as an adult? What if the way that you lead, achieve, love, react, and even define success was shaped long before you ever started your career? Today, we're going to answer one of the most common questions that I get from clients and prospective clients. Why does my childhood matter? Because once you understand where and why these patterns formed, you finally have the opportunity to reclaim power and stop letting them define who you are today and where you're going. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer Podcast. My name is Paul Salter. I'm a high performance mindset coach and hypnotherapist, and my goal is simple: to challenge you, to confront you, to relate to you, and ultimately to inspire you while providing you with an opportunity to change perspectives, to reframe past and present situations, and to arm you with tools and tactics to get out of your own way, to get unstuck and achieve your potential. Now, I apologize in advance. I don't have that perfect, cool, clear, crisp voice that you're so accustomed to in today's conversation. I've been fighting something off for what feels like forever, and I'm hoping that I'm finally on the mend. Time will tell. But I'm grateful you're here. And if you're new, welcome. Quick overview of what we do here on the show. Every Monday, I go solo, pouring into you for 20, 30, occasionally 40 minutes. And every Thursday, I sit down with an incredibly successful, high-performing individual just like yourself to have an honest, raw, deep, vulnerable conversation about what it's taken to achieve and sustain success. And this is a good opportunity for me to plant a little seed of awareness, because this week I have the opportunity to record the first 2 episodes of an additional podcast that I'm launching. And that podcast is entitled The Cost of Success, where I sit down with individuals who, from the outside looking in, by all means and versions of the definition of success, they have it all. The money, the prestige, the company, the respect, the position, the house, the wife, the kids, the boat, the plane. Yet inside, they're quietly suffering, managing anxiety, depression, isolation, loneliness, fear, never feeling enough, constantly trying to prove themselves. And I've been really allowing this idea to incubate and bake for almost a half a year. And I'm taking a unique approach, at least in the conversation and podcasting space, to create a safe environment to have a very vulnerable conversation with these incredibly successful people about the cost of success. And just this week alone, I have the opportunity to sit down with individuals whose companies have done well over 8 figures year after year, who have the planes, the private jets, the boats, the yachts. But boy, do they have some sacrifices, trade-offs, and consequences to discuss on their entrepreneurial journey. And through this conversation, I hope to just pose and continue to answer one simple question. Was the cost of success worth it? So be sure to continue listening to this show, because this show will continue. And continue to connect with me on Instagram at the Paul Salter, so you're updated and you're in the know as to when this additional podcast, The Cost of Success, does go live. The tentative launch date is sometime in September. Now, back to this show, back to this conversation. Why does my childhood matter? Before we go any further, I want to clear something up. This episode isn't about blaming your parents or digging through your childhood just for the sake of it. And honestly, it's not really about your childhood at all. It's about your life today. Your childhood isn't important because it explains your past. It's important because it explains your present. If you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, like you can't slow down without feeling guilty, if your self-worth rises and falls based on performance, if you're always chasing the next goal, but it never feels like enough, if you struggle to trust people, receive compliments, or stay calm under pressure, those aren't random personality traits. They're patterns, programs. And patterns always have an origin. As a child, your brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. It adapted. It created strategies, in this case, patterns, programs, to help you find love, safety, attention, approval, a sense of belonging. Those strategies were absolutely brilliant then. They helped you survive. The problem is that you are likely living with many of those same patterns decades later without realizing it. And something I tell clients or prospective clients all the time is that your superpowers, those intangibles, the grit, the tenacity, the ambition, and some of those patterns I just alluded to, inevitably will reach a point where they become your kryptonite. The goal of this conversation isn't to change your past. It's to help you understand the operating system, the collection of patterns and programs that's been quietly running your life, so that you can finally decide whether or not it still deserves to be in control. Every single child, you, me, is born asking the same unconscious questions. How do I stay safe? How do I belong? How do I get love? How do I avoid rejection? How do I matter? And what's interesting here is your brain doesn't answer these questions intellectually. It answers them experientially. And then It creates rules. Those rules become your operating system. And most people never realize that they're still living by those rules decades later. What's often lost is remembering that children have needs far beyond food and shelter, far beyond needing to be cuddled, coddled, and have their diaper changed. Children need safety, love, attention, affection, emotional attunement, acceptance, validation. They need consistency, encouragement, comfort, protection, reassurance. And children cannot meet these needs on their own. So they adapt through observation, through experience, through rapid learning to form patterns and programs to get these needs met. Children adapt to their environment, their parents, their siblings, their relatives, their neighborhood, school, peers, friends. And what most people lose sight of is the fact that adaptation is brilliant. It helps you as a child, children as a whole, survive. The problem, however, or not problem, the challenge, I should say, is that as a child, you don't choose your beliefs. You develop adaptations, and every adaptation has one purpose: to help you stay connected to the people keeping you alive. Because as a child, connection equals survival. So the brain is constantly asking, who do I need to become? What do I need to do to stay loved? Now, I understand this might still seem a little abstract, so let's make it real. Because the way that these adaptations show up isn't always obvious. Many of you in particular, might be thinking and kind of going back through your childhood looking for trauma. And most of the time, these adaptations don't form or don't look like trauma. They look like personality. They look like perfectionism, people pleasing, hyper independence, a need to achieve, the inability to slow down and relax, being the responsible one, struggling to relinquish control, avoiding conflict, seeking approval. And these aren't character flaws. They're often survival strategies that worked incredibly well to help you get your childhood needs met. They're just no longer serving you today. So let me provide you with a few examples. And as you listen, as I share these, don't worry about whether every detail matches your childhood. Instead, ask yourself one simple question: which one sounds most like me today? So let me give you an example. Perhaps growing up, mom and dad, maybe dad in particular, only celebrated performance, results. When you brought home straight A's, or you performed incredibly well in an individual sport, or your team won, performing, that was how you got attention, affection, and validation from dad. You learned, I need to earn love. Well, fast forward 40 years later, and you still, to this day, never feel enough. Achievement has become your oxygen. Let me give you another example. Perhaps you were raised in a chaotic household. You had one or maybe two emotionally unpredictable parents. You learned to become hyper vigilant, to always read the room, to always anticipate conflict. And as an adult, you're an amazing leader. You're fantastic at reading team members, clients, but you're terrible at relaxing, slowing down. You're always on, scanning, preparing, anxious. Another situation, maybe You had to parent your parents, and your environment and household forced you to stop being a kid, maybe as early as 8, 9 years old, because mom leaned on you emotionally. Dad checked out, and you had to become the adult. And now, fast forward, everyone else's needs come first. You have the money, the prestige, the position, but maybe your health is in significantly dire shape. Your marriage is on the fritz. Everyone else's needs come first because delegation feels uncomfortable. You overfunction, you carry everyone else's challenges emotionally and literally, yet deep down you secretly resent it. And one more, just to give us a well-rounded landscape here. Maybe growing up, conflict wasn't safe. There were dire consequences, maybe even patterns of abusive consequences. So you learned that you needed to keep everyone happy. Fast forward decades later, you have a doctorate in people pleasing. You have zero or very weak boundaries. You have a difficult time initiating and having hard conversations. And you struggle to speak up, to put your needs first. Which of those most resembles some of the behaviors and choices you continue to make today? Now, a question you might have is, okay, now that I'm aware of where a behavior I'm not fond of that is hurting me originates from, can I just stop? Cool, I'm aware now. Is that enough? Isn't awareness enough? If only it were that easy. Because you're not fighting a bad habit. You're fighting a survival strategy. A survival strategy. And this goes well beyond an intellectual understanding. Survival is rooted in your nervous system. Your nervous system currently believes that whatever pattern is most holding you back right now, that pattern keeps you safe. And this is why awareness alone rarely creates change, because the role of your nervous system is incredibly important. Safety is the priority. Your nervous system isn't asking, will this make me happy? It's asking, is this familiar? And familiar, 99.9% of the time, will always win over happy, even when familiar hurts. Because when you encounter another familiar situation, your nervous system, your subconscious can quickly see and predict what's going to happen, access the archive of past experiences. Oh yeah, I've survived this before, so it's totally fine. Even if it's incredibly uncomfortable, stressful, overwhelmingly anxious, fearful, whatever it may be, your nervous system understands you've already survived a similar situation, you're going to survive it again. And that's much safer versus stepping into the unknown. And this is why you continue to repeat the same patterns over and over. Those patterns might be dating emotionally unavailable partners, overworking, always feeling anxious, striving for perfect, or recreating chaos for the sake of being able to problem solve and then create more chaos to problem solve and be the hero again. All of that feels normal and familiar, which means deep down, it's safe. What's the cost of not doing this work? Well, candidly, as far away as you might be removed from childhood, you never leave childhood behind. You bring your childhood into your leadership, your marriage, your parenting, your business, your finances, your friendship, your health, your relationships. Every room you walk into, your nervous system walks into first. And what makes this so paradoxical and difficult to fully grasp is that you likely have the success that you have today because of your childhood survival strategies. This need to prove yourself, this desire to achieve, to be needed, to be perfect, to control everything. These strategies helped build your business and life as you know it today. And they're also what make enjoying your business and the life you created impossible. The same patterns that create extraordinary success often create extraordinary suffering. So, what's the goal of this work? You might think that the goal is healing the child. Inner child healing is a therapeutic concept, buzzword, fairly popular on social media these days. But let me suggest a different phrasing. The goal for you in understanding when, why, and how some of these patterns formed is to help you, the adult, today realize that the child can stop working because you're safe now. The job is over. You don't have to keep earning love. You don't have to keep proving yourself. You don't have to keep performing to deserve a sense of acceptance and belonging. Another perhaps silly but easy to understand way to think about it is this. Imagine that your parents bought you a winter coat when you were 8 years old. It kept you warm, it protected you, it helps you survive winter. Well, fast forward 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, you're still wearing it. The coat isn't bad. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. The problem is, all these decades later, it doesn't fit. It restricts your movement. It makes you uncomfortable. People laugh because it obviously doesn't belong anymore. That's exactly what these childhood survival strategies are. They're not broken. They're simply too small for the life you're trying to live today. Now, one of the last questions I want to address before we wrap up this conversation is really around, is it possible to take the coat off and truly move forward unencumbered from wearing that coat for so long? And there's this neat concept or term known as memory reconsolidation that brilliantly answers this question. And I'll use a quick metaphor to help you understand it. I've shared it before here on the show. From the moment you're born, your life story is being written. So if you think of all your childhood experience as just an ongoing story, well, each specific memory or moment in your story, imagine being able to access it like a Microsoft Word or a Google Doc. You can pull up chapter 8 from age 8, February, and you can see it as a Microsoft Word document. Well, the work I do with my clients, specifically using hypnosis, allows us to pull up that Google Doc from age 9 when belief A, B, or C formed. And we can do the work necessary to diffuse the emotion from one of those moments as a child you learned one of these survival strategies or patterns. We can rewrite the story and then we can place it back, which then alters the entire experience from that moment onward up until the present moment. And again, it's called memory reconsolidation. We're accessing these memories just like we would open a Google document, and we're doing some editing, removing some emotion, adding some color, shifting some perspective. And that in and of itself makes it significantly more likely that you now are able to tap into the energy necessary to let go of the pattern or survival strategy that is no longer serving you. If this episode helped you connect dots that you've never connected before, I want you to remember this. Awareness is the first step, but awareness alone doesn't create transformation. You can spend years understanding why you think, feel, and react the way you do, and still find yourself repeating the same patterns under pressure. And this is one crucial reason why traditional talk therapy can be so ineffective. You're just analyzing, intellectualizing the same patterns. Why am I the way I am over and over again at the conscious level? But as I talked about in today's conversation, this is subconscious. This is nervous system. We got to go deep to the origin of when the belief, the pattern programmed formed. Because real change, it happens when you stop trying to outwork, outthink, or outrun those patterns and begin changing them at the source. If you're successful on the outside, but you know there's another level of peace, presence, fulfillment, and freedom available to you, I'd love to help you get there. That's exactly the work I do with founders, CEOs, executives, and high performers just like you in my one-on-one coaching. Together, we'll identify the subconscious patterns that have been quietly running your life, eliminate the ones that no longer serve you, and help you build a life that doesn't just look successful, but finally feels successful too. And if you're ready, I invite you to use the link in the show notes to apply for one-on-one coaching with me today. I appreciate you listening to another episode of the Unstuck High Performer podcast. Do me a favor, share this conversation with somebody in your circle. I know there's someone who needs to hear it. And I would greatly appreciate if you stop this episode, scroll down, and leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's show. Thank you again for listening. Make today great, and I'll catch you in Thursday's episode.